I teach grade 1 through grade 8, strictly music. The lesson that you're looking at today is a cross-curricular lesson between visual arts and music to show the kids that there really is a true connection between the different areas of the arts. I have a good working relationship with the visual arts teacher, and we saw that within the new curriculum that this really needed to be addressed a little bit more than it did in the past. We started off with the students analyzing some pieces of artwork that we found. And with their art teacher, they went through and really discussed all the different design elements that there were. Then they came in to me as the music teacher, and we said, okay, based on those design elements that you just found, if you were to compose a piece of music, what do you think would need to be in it? So then they took a piece of music for the next step of it. We analyzed that piece of music in terms of music elements, and then they went back to their art teacher and actually then did create a piece of art.
We were assessed on our justification because we had to correlate the music to the design elements. You can do whatever you want in those two, but just the thing is you were assessed on your justification that you had to make so people understand why you did that. So you're not just like, oh, yellow makes me think of this and writing it down. But you have to justify.
Either for art they had a final visual project, or now for this particular project they will have a final performance for me of what they have composed.
This assignment has made me kind of appreciate art in a different way, and that when I look at art, I kind of think of its musical equivalent too.
Who's got an idea for me on what we can do and what we see in terms of design element and form, and how we can put that into what we're working on in our compositions?
Well, if I look at the piece from left to right, I kind of see off symmetry. So the left and the far right are fairly similar. So if you had like an A on either side and then a very different B in the middle, I feel that would give a good form for this piece.
Okay? When we want to take a really good chunk of our melody, which is usually like the first theme that we have, and repeat it, because we know that music gets repeated all the time, over and over and over. But we can repeat it with a little bit of a twist. How can we create that twist in terms of different music elements?
You could take the tones and go from a lower A and move it up to a high tones for the second A.
Okay, so we can change those pitches just a little bit off from the melody. So you're changing the melody a little bit. What other musical element could we change just to make a little bit of something different then? Peter?
Dynamics. In one part, if you did A loud, in the next part you could do it a little bit quieter, or if it's with many different instruments, you could choose a different instrument and have it a little bit quieter. And
if we're choosing different instruments, we've gone to a totally different musical element, which would be what?
Timbre.
Right, timbre. Exactly right. Exactly right.
I've learned quite a bit about music, how the certain elements can create the different feel of a piece of music, like timbre especially, because each instrument has a unique quality to it, such as the reason the flute doesn't sound like a trumpet, because the trumpet has much more power and it's very piercing, and the flute is very elegant and light. You cannot do a composition of this nature without incorporating all of the music elements. Some of them are much easier, I feel, for them to work around, but they certainly cannot go through something like this without touching on all of the 6 elements of music.
I've learned the elements of music. Like, I had no idea like how much stuff goes into just composing a piece of music, and like you can listen to a piece of music and notice all the duration, the pitch, the dynamics of all the piece just by learning the elements of music.
In order for the kids at this level in their musicianship to actually compose something of that scale, it would really be helpful for them to use a music software program, and it's rather difficult in a school this size to be able to have access to computers all the time.
Well, software, it lets me, so I don't have to pull out my instrument each time and try and fail, because it takes a lot of practice. So I just have to basically press a play button, and then it plays my art for me, and I can just play different sections. And when I'm placing the notes, it plays that tone for me, so I don't have to think it in my head, and helps me to find out what I have to do.
The students have been given a planning sheet to help them through this whole process, where they have a chance to talk about each of the various design elements. So the first one here that this student talked about was the design element of color. And he has an opportunity to telling me about 3 different things that have to do with color. And then they have a choice to then choose various music elements that they want to connect to that. And then over here, the justification to tell me why they chose those. As they're in the process of this composing, I'd be going around from student to student, looking at what they've got written on their planning sheet and having them actually show me, well, here it is right here in the composition.
I have a sort of A, B, C, and then an A alternate, like
Right.
we talked about in the forum before.
So how have you changed that A, and how does that connect to the artwork in terms of the changes that you put in the A?
Well, I have the same sort of starting line, but in the second measure, I lengthened one of the notes because I see a really long one sticking out of the side there, and it instead of like 2 little horn type thingies on the side. I also changed up the notes to make it sort of flow more at the beginning and sort of go down at the end.
There's a little bit, there's a jump now going up to the G on that one, yeah.
And here it's more towards the end of the piece, so it's going down and then it goes up and ends with a crescendo and a long whole note.
There's not really a right or wrong to any of this, as long as they can give me a really good reason why it works in their ears. High tones, you're talking about the bright yellow fire in there. Okay, so where are you representing that in this piece?
I have a lot of Fs and Es and Ds, which are the higher notes.
I'm kind of noticing that every time you get to your higher pitches, which is your G there, you tend to hold them longer, which I think is a good idea because it almost makes the brightness stick out a little bit more. If you can, and you feel you can with your playing, I'd even go even higher and go up to your high B flat, and to really, really get the intensity of there. If you can go even higher, that might be a really, really good idea for you, okay? They're really, in some ways, astounding me with what they're coming up with and coming out with ideas that I would never have thought of, and which has been really fun for me to see how their minds are working and how the creative process is going through them. We embrace the fact that when we're first starting off on instruments that we're all going to just be terrible together. We set the ground rules in terms of the respect that's needed for an environment like this, because they realize that some of the kids are a little bit more musically savvy than others, and when they see someone who maybe has been struggling for a while and they go and they do a playing test, and all of a sudden they will just burst into applause. It's the best thing in the world, and you can just see it on the kids' faces when they realize, my gosh, that's the best I've ever personally played. If I find one clarinet player is doing a really good job with hand position and another one with tone, well, I will compare in that instance, so they're getting that modeling from their classmates on similar instruments.
I like the feedback because you listen to your piece and you say, oh, I kind of like that, or I don't like this part, but I don't understand what's wrong with it, and you go up to your friend and say, hey, listen to this. Do you like this part? How could I fix it?
Some of the kids at first can't tell if someone's tonguing or not tonguing, and that's something that they need to develop in their ears, in their ear training process. I'm going to put Peter on the spot right here, and what the class is going to do is we're going to play this right off of the computer and see if we can figure out what he's trying to connect to in terms of a design element. Good. What'd What'd you hear? Yay! What'd you hear?
It sounded that the half note going right to the eighth note sounded pretty connecting from the edge to the middle. Like it just went right to high, like low to high, so it sounded really good.
I liked how Peter went from the low notes to the high notes, just like the different colors in the piece, like
So the contrast and the jumps, okay?
just like from the yellow to the gold, red, and a bit of yellow at the top.
Good for you, Peter. Really nicely done. You've got a challenge there for something to play here. Once they finish their compositions, they will practice them and perform them for me, and we'll get another grade out of that at the end. I was very proud of the progress that they are making throughout the whole project. Together with the visual arts teacher, we developed a rubric which would then help us to assess what has gone on during this process. We need to see their knowledge of the technical elements of it, their thought process as they are analyzing the different design and musical elements, and then how they then communicate these things into going either from art to music or music to art.
I found that the design elements to music was more difficult because I am a more visual person, so creating something that comes to my ears is slightly more challenging than seeing something.
Earlier on, my focus used to be almost solely performance-driven. I think I've gotten much better at making sure that they're becoming more overall musicians. I think in the future, I'm going to have to look at it as we always do to revamp and see how I can tighten some things up. But overall, I was very, very pleased with this first go at creating something of this nature for the new document. I still think I need to find a balance because part of me is still fighting against that, gosh, we want to be able to perform, we want to be able to perform, because I've got some outstanding musicians who are a little bit held back in the classroom setting that really need the enrichment of the big concert band and the jazz bands and the choirs and the musical theater and all of that stuff that I feel fortunate that I'm able to give them here.
Performing in front of the live audience is really important because you not only get the feedback of your peers once they hear it, but also you get to see their reaction like, ooh, that was cool.
The important thing here is making the connection from one strand to the other. And it can be as simple as with my grade 1 students putting on a piece of music and getting them to draw something that goes with it. And it can be very as simple as that. Or how we would move or dance to a piece of music. And you just connect that and grow that as you get into the older grades. In your primary or junior grades, you can even take something as simple as all the different types of rhythm instruments that are out there. Okay, what are we going to do with this? I see this poem that I have in front of me. How can this instrument that I'm shaking in the background, what part of the poem would that go with? And make the poem sound even neater in the background, and have that talk with them about the amount of music that we hear in the background of our lives all the time. In the TV, in the movies, in the commercials, in the elevator, there's music everywhere. And what is it doing to put us in a certain place in our lives?
Music and art are an integral part of our lives, and we see them every day. And even though we might take them for granted sometimes, they're really important because they're always there. And it's really the most creative people in the world creating art and music. And when you see that, it's really beautiful sometimes.